Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. Today we are making a bit of a divergence in our usual track of Jiu-Jitsu people on the show. Today we have for you Mr. Anthony Krznar. Is that how I pronounce his surname?
Krznar doesn't matter. That was good.
He is a famous power lifter. If you are in the powerlifting world, you definitely know the guy. And let's hope after this podcast, people in the jiu-jitsu world will know you as well. So, Anthony, thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So, actually, have you ever done jiu-jitsu before? It's probably a pretty important question to start with on our BJJ podcast.
So, I have rolled on the mats one time for fun, but I worked at out of a jiu-jitsu gym, Renegade MMA, for 2.5 years. So I mates with Jamie and everyone there, Cal Pot and everyone. I was just strength and conditioning coach there for probably about 2 years before I opened my own gym. So I love jiu-jitsu. I coach a fair few jiu-jitsu people, coach a lot of clients that do jiu-jitsu. I've met a lot of people through that. And I do like to stay somewhat up to date where I can, especially through clients now. But I love the sport. It's actually one of my favorite sports to watch. After being there for 2 years, you get a lot of appreciation for it and how much time it takes.
Well, you're the one guy who likes to watch jiu-jitsu in the world. Well done, man.
I love that because you can see people thinking.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the thing. You can see them feeling each other out, working it out, and it's amazing to watch. I never did it simply because I knew I'd get injured for powerlifting.
Yeah. So you've done a bit of the strength and conditioning work for jiu-jitsu people, for practitioners. So you're probably more aware than most strength coaches of the stress that we put on our joints and onto our bodies. Have you got any advice about how to do the both together? Because it seems pretty tricky.
Yeah. So a lot of it, a lot of people that do true sports, the same advice goes to them. But particularly with you guys, you always have little injuries and everything, and overuse injuries as well. So the thing is, people will go to a coach and go, I do jiu-jitsu. I want to get stronger for jiu-jitsu. So the coach, a lot of the time, will just throw them on a normal strength program, get them up to doing heavy doubles, heavy singles. And when I coach jiu-jitsu people, I tell them from the start, you're not going to be doing 1 rep maxes with me. You have no business doing 1 rep maxes. There's no carryover to the mat, right? Heavy work, we'll still go heavy, but you're not a strength athlete. We're trying to get stronger for your sport. So, a lot of the time I don't even have them deadlifting. We do trap bar deadlifts and stuff instead because we're trying to get whatever we can to the mat. We try to assess the risk profile. Obviously, things like trap bar deads and that have less risk than normal deadlifts, and they have more carryover. You got 2 birds, 1 stone. So my big thing is heavy work, getting stronger is important. Doing the actual heavy lift and the heavy doubles and the triples and the singles is not important because that's not really where you build strength, right? So if you've got a coach that's trying to get you to, and you're a devoted jiu-jitsu athlete and you're not trying to do powerlifting at the same time, moderately heavy weights with some good variations are really important, but not overdoing it. Also, usually less is more if you're actually just trying to train for jits. All the guys that I train that do jits will train at a maximum, do weights 3 days a week. 3 times a week at the most. A lot of them will do 2 because it's supplementary, right? It's not their main sport.
Yeah. And what would they be doing there? 5x5s? You mentioned about not going too heavy. What would work best?
It's individual. We still do a lot of accessories, or not a lot for them. Because a squat's good for pressing power, but a lot of time you're not going to squat up your opponent, right? So we do a lot of pulling, as you can imagine, a lot of rowing, we do squats and everything, but you don't need high volume to get strong. 3 sets of the top list, once or twice a week, and then accessory work's all you need. Really, the guys that do for jits are in and out in 45 minutes to an hour. We do a bit of squatting. Benching has its place, and people like to do a bench press. It's a lift people like to do. Are you going to get a lot of carryover to jiu-jitsu? Probably not. Things like overhead pressing, incline pressing are probably a lot better, and usually a lot better for jits athletes. So powerlifting is really good for bench press is really good for powerlifting, not so good for other sports, right? You don't lay down on your back and press someone up into the air.
Unless you're Theo. It's his birthday.
Unless
I'm
you're
trying to
Theo.
get that out of him, man. It's all about the technique. You've got to like move your own body, not the other person so much. But yeah, nah,
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. And you mentioned about like starting your own gym. So I actually have been to your gym, Apex, pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic started. You started up probably early 2020 in that gym?
So we moved location. We've had the gym for coming up 4 years now, Apex Strength. But we moved to a new location January last year. So not the best timing, but who would have known?
Yeah. And so how's that been for you? Dare I ask, being a business owner in this environment?
It's going okay. We're in a lot better spot than a lot of other gyms. We're quite lucky in the way that because we started as such a small, intimate club, we have a core group of members that always want a gym to come back to. So we're very lucky. Like even Theo last year supported us through all last year. I think he supported through a lot of this year. I don't recall, but he gets it because he trained in those kind of clubs. So we're very lucky compared to big gyms. Like we've probably got 90 members, but we're lucky compared to really big gyms because we've got that loyalty. People have that loyalty to Tyler and myself, the two owners, and they've got the loyalty to the community they want. Now, not everyone's paying, and we don't expect that, but we're lucky in that case, and we're also lucky because the overheads aren't super high. It's been tough because we haven't really gone backwards, but it's almost, there's been like a year and a half of very stagnant growth, like no growth. But we're okay. Like we're making it through. It's stressful. Like we all want to be there, but we're not, at risk going under, which is a lot better of a situation than a lot of people are in. We're very lucky for that. I'm very, very happy about that.
Yep.
The best thing about situation, I have had 3 or 4 mates lose their gyms that they owned for, 7 to 10 years. So we're extremely lucky.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of like just dig a bit deeper into the kind of the psychology of all of this stuff, I guess. Like with, powerlifting and that kind of that sport, what's kind of like a misunderstood kind of area of that sport? What's something that people like me, tiny me, wouldn't understand at surface value or at first glance that, as part of it?
There's a lot, but I think a lot of people expect us to be like, get angry when we're lifting, be loud, be aggressive, be maybe not standoffish, but that very vocal, loud, like, even myself, I've got long hair, a beard, I've got tattoos all over me. And then, they come into the gym and I'm talking about mental health and depression and stuff like that. So a lot of people from the outside looking in, because they look at you, what do we post? Well, I'm not going to post my small sets of squats. I'll post my 420 kilos where I'm yelling and I'm hyped up on caffeine. I'm like, come on, let's do it. But we're actually very supportive, pretty intimate group of people. Some people are like that, but you got to think of where powerlifting started. There used to be an underground sport. There are a lot of bikies and stuff. And it still does carry that stigma a little bit until people meet even the new age of powerlifters, right? Where a lot of us are doing it to better ourselves, to help cope. We're trying to become better people. We're trying to understand ourselves. We're all trying to find, some people use it as a coping mechanism. Some people use it for self-growth, but there's a lot of that now. Like I said, if you jump on my Insta, I talk about a lot of body image. I'm this big 125 kilo guy. I've got, I'm a big dude. I'm pretty lean for my weight. And I talk about body image a lot because I hate looking at myself. So it's a lot of, nowadays, it's a lot of that. We're there to help each other, not just, with the list, but mentally, and people are just trying to get that self-growth out of it because it's very empowering, right? So you've never done anything, you've been bullied, you have depression, but you can come to the gym 4 days a week, you see steady progress, you've got friends there. It's very empowering. Also, when you see a lot of people come in that have had disordered eating and or eating disorders, they start looking at their body as what it can do rather than how it looked. Right?
Very similar to jiu-jitsu by the sound of it then, in all aspects, like the probably misunderstanding for the people that don't do it, but, the empowerment that you can get from what you do with it.
100%. And that's what we really try to push.
Just to interrupt, to take a step back, can you, for our listeners, just explain exactly what powerlifting is? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that don't even know what it is. They confuse it with bodybuilding, weightlifting, whatever. So can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so powerlifting in essence is, it should really be called weightlifting. Power's got nothing to do with it. It's about how strong you can be on the squat, bench press, and deadlift. So we do a lot of lifts outside of that, but the whole sport of powerlifting, you go to a competition, you've got 3 squats to do, 3 bench presses to do, 3 deadlifts to do. And each one hopefully is intermittently heavier. You need a squat to depth that. So it's really just a sport of doing clean squat, bench press, and deadlift, and just how strong you can get within the bounds of that competition. So you need to squat deep enough. You need to pause your bench presses. You can't hitch, like jerk up your deadlift or anything. So it's purely strength-based, and it's very, very simple. Everything's in one plane of movement, up and down. Like, everything, there's no, like, weightlifting is a very hard sport on the body because, clean and jerks, multiple planes of movement. There's so many variables there. We just do squat, bench, and deadlift in competition, and we train to increase those throughout the year.
Right. What would you say, you talked a little bit earlier about how jiu-jitsu people kind of carry little injuries the whole time. So true. And then they also kind of suffer with overuse of certain muscles. I'm imagining that there's an equivalent in the powerlifting game, or is it that when you guys you don't get injured, and when you do, it's monumental? Or like, what does the injury curve look like?
So we like to call them niggles, but we all have some niggles, right? So like my hip is always a little bit sore, but I just choose to ignore it because I know it's not catastrophic. So we get the same a lot. A lot of people will have sore elbows from pressing so much, benching all the time, squatting. So no, we get a lot of those as well. Mm-hmm. But when a big injury happens, usually it's big. That's the thing. So powerlifting, as far as what we call niggles, those little injuries, those little chronic injuries, whether it's like tendinopathy or, just inflammation in the joint and stuff like that, they happen a lot. Because they're not super important. You can work around them, you can manage those. But powerlifting, the sport, actually has quite a low amount of injuries compared to other sports, again, because everything's in one plane of motion. So it's not like footy where you're turning around all the time. Your joints need to go in all different angles, and you step to the side while you're sprinting and something goes snap. Yeah. The thing is that if, say, a tendon does go snap on a 400-kilo squat, then something big usually happens and it leads to multiple injuries. So we've seen a lot of people, they'll squat something heavy, one quad will tear, but then everything shifts onto the other side and all the quad tendons in that other legs snap because obviously you went from spreading the load to one leg bearing the whole weight. That happened to Brandon Allen. He was squatting, tore one quad and then snapped all the ligaments in his knees and all his quad ligaments and tendons because the way it shifted. Yeah. So the big injuries are big. They usually put you out for a long time. My biggest injury has been a quad tear at 2016 IPF Worlds, but it was only in the muscle, so it wasn't too bad. And actually last year, funnily enough, I had to get surgery because I was warming up for my first ever 400-kilo squat in the garage in lockdown, and I hit the squat rack on the first warm-up and snapped my finger. But
wow,
I squatted up into it, and I was there to do a 400 squat, and the bone was out of the finger. Wow. And my finger was just kind of like hanging, like the meat was hanging. So we just bandaged it up with chucks.
That's a niggle, right? I'm learning. That's a niggle.
That one was a big one. I remember because I did the squat, and you see in the video, I've got this big bandage like covered in blood on my finger. And then I went to the chemist and they sent me to the hospital when I had to get surgery. And they were like, hey, you should have been in hospital hours ago. You need IV antibiotics now. And I was like, oh, why? And they're like, oh, the bone is out of your finger. Like,
jeez. Wow. And what are your goals, Anthony? Like you mentioned about like your squat and things like that. Theo tells me that you're somewhere around the 1,000-kilo total for squat, bench, and dead. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right around where I am now. My all-time goal, look, if I don't get injured in the next, I'm 28, in the next 5 or 7 years, my all-time goal would be hopefully all-time world record total, which is right now 1,112.5 kilos. But there's a lot of variables that go into that. It's about whether you get injured or not. There's a lot of people that are at that top level, right? And in powerlifting, usually the records are held by people that have been in it for a long time. They're in their 30s, and it's just about trying to steer clear of injury while progressing. So that's my whole goal right now, is train smart, hopefully set some all-time world records, and then hopefully retire without being forced to retire from snapping something.
Yeah.
You think it's possible to do for a long time? Like, is it a sport that you can do longevity wise, or
Golf, tennis?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of variables. So powerlifting is one of the very few sports that has tested and untested. So you have people that openly use PEDs and people that don't use PEDs. Obviously, they compete separately. Usually, the people that don't use PEDs have longer careers. Obviously, because one, they're not lifting as heavy. Two, there's not as much stress on the body. And three, health isn't as big of an issue, right? Whereas when if you're taking PEDs, you're trying to balance health, you're trying to balance pretty rapid strength progression with keeping your body fresh and healthy. But that can be hard to do. So there are very long careers. Like you've got his name, David Ricks. He's American. He's 62 or 63 kilos. He's natural. He just squatted 325 kilos. I think he weighs 90 something kilos, like super strong, been a long time. There's a lot of people that are in it for 20 plus years, keep lifting competitively. Yeah, it just comes down to health and whether you get injured. But yeah, for me, it's something that I don't plan to be at my best for another 8 years until I'm like 35, 36.
Wow.
You compete
So
naturally.
you're what, 27 at the moment? Is that
I'm 28, I'm 29 next year.
29? Yeah. And how long have you been doing it? What got you into it?
I started at just before I was 21. So I did a bit of lifting when I was 17. I did just like a year of bodybuilding training at the local Genesis gym with a PT there. Then I stopped for years. And then just before I was 21, I had a guy that I worked with at Crown. He was my boss. His dad was a weightlifting coach. He did powerlifting. He took me into the gym. I did like a 200 kilo deadlift and a 100 kilo bench. I hadn't trained in like 3-4 years. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is pretty good. And all I remember saying is like, so you're saying I don't need to like starve myself like before, right? That was my big thing. I was like, I get to eat a lot, yeah. And that was really the rest is history. I moved to England a couple of months later, became friends with a bunch of powerlifters at the local gym, and I competed like 8 months later. So I've been in it for about 7 coming up to 8 years. And Anton, I heard your question before, do I compete tested? I used to. I switched last year.
Well, I'd love to talk a bit about that if you're comfortable to. Like,
I'm comfortable with that.
What's your advice in inverted commas? Like you know, like yeah, did it help? Obviously, it helped, but you know, what was the impact? Like, whatever you want to share about that would be amazing.
I got a lot stronger. So I was already competing at a very high level. Like I'd been at Worlds. I'd won a world championship in the World Powerlifting Federation. You know, I was already squatting like 340 plus kilos. So I was already really strong. It was just a natural progression for me and I always had planned to. It was just about time frame and lining up again of that. I've always had that goal to be at my strongest in my 30s, where most people are. Like long term, right? We look always long term goals. If you chase short term progression, you're probably going to hurt yourself or do something silly to rush that. It was a big shift in my physique. I went from a very soft serve looking 120 kilos, whereas now at like 120 kilos, I've got abs. I look like I lift is an easy way to say it. I'm a big guy. Strength progressed very, very fast. And obviously health still in check is something I keep a close eye on. As far as advice for that is so most of my lifters are natural. A good way to put it is it's all about risk versus reward. So if you're going to switch to untested, take PEDs, and you're not going to be at the highest level you can be of your sport, then it's probably not worth it because you are training potentially years and years of your life, right? So when I get someone come in and they're an average lifter, not that there's anything wrong with that. We're not, I'm not like being a hero. I coach lifters from absolute beginners to world champion level lifters. But if you're coming in and your chances of being the best aren't very good, is it really worth sacrificing your health for it? Well, in my book, no. So for me, it's about just, balancing that risk versus reward. You can also, because there's no such thing as safe steroid use. Just like there's no such thing as a healthy level to smoke cigarettes. Yeah. So it's just kind of like that. It's risk versus reward and whether you're willing to take those risks on. It's generally pretty young people that want to jump on. And when you're 19, 20, you don't think about long-term, right? If I had jumped on at 2021, I would be a very unhealthy person right now. Having started at 27, had a little, I'm engaged. We're looking to have kids soon. There's a lot more reasons to be healthy and not do anything silly. Does that make sense?
Sure. That's unbelievable. Thank you for sharing.
No, that's all right. Like, powerlifting, we're lucky, is one of those few sports where you can be open about it.
Yeah. Amazing.
And changing tacks a bit here, in the jiu-jitsu community recently, there's been a bit of news about some sexual misconduct between females and their coaches. And I believe that you've been quite outspoken in regard to a similar sort of stuff that's been going on in the powerlifting community. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, like about what happened and...
Yeah, both. Like, for the people that are listening, probably don't know the background from the powerlifting side of things, but yeah, just your thoughts on that.
I won't name names, but a person that's very high up in a federation and a coach allegedly sexually assaulted, sexually harassed one of his clients and a member of said federation. What happened was she tried to go through the right sources to bring it up. They ignored it and sent it straight to him. So she got hit with a defamation lawsuit. So they didn't do any due diligence. And then she ended up going to the Age about it. Now, I've been very outspoken about it for good reason. But unfortunately, it seems like what's come out of that is that it's very common in a lot of sports, people abusing their powers. So we get a lot of people going, like, because they were apparently in a relationship beforehand anyway. And we get a lot of people saying that, like, oh, well, they were in a relationship, she could be lying and stuff, which is disgusting. But also, my whole take on that was, at the very minimum, if you want to ignore that sexual assault / harassment allegation, if you want to ignore that, at the very minimum, there's been a gross abuse of power here, right? When you're the head of the Fed, when you're someone's coach, it's a very intimate, trusting relationship. It's very easy to abuse. And that's why we have strict guidelines on what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. Having any sexual or romantic relationship with clients and stuff, especially when you're in that position, is not on. The very minimum, there's been a very big gross abuse of power. And, there should be repercussions for that. So a lot of people have left that federation, rightfully so, because they didn't handle it very well. It was kind of like, oh, we'll have to wait and see. There wasn't any, oh, this behavior is wrong. Like at the very basic level, it's wrong. But yeah, that's been a really big thing. So I've been very vocal about it. A lot of powerlifters have been very vocal about it. The reason we were being so vocal about it is, one, it was big news and we don't want it to happen to anyone else. But two, she just wasn't getting hurt. So she went to the Age. We all shared the Age. I sent the article to a big powerlifting page, and the dude's response was, well, she's probably lying. Women will lie about anything to get what they want, right? And I posted that up because I was disgusted. And the reason after that I got very involved, because it showed a really big issue within the lifting world, right? When people are thinking like that in these situations. And luckily, the majority of the powerlifting community in Australia has banded together to help. And, she's got a good lawyer now that's doing it pro bono, which is really good as an outcome of everyone making so much noise. So hopefully that works out really well for her. And now we're looking at what we can do in other federations to make sure due diligence is always going to be followed if anything like this, unfortunately, ever does happen again. But yeah, it's been a really, really big deal in the Australian powerlifting community. And unfortunately, worldwide, like I had a lot of people from England and America messaging me, one male, but I had about 40, 50 females message me and call me with their own, that wanted to just talk to someone about it with their own circumstances that were very similar, where they just got ignored because the said party has power in the federation. So they got it brushed under the carpet. So we're just trying to, at least where we can, as members of the federation, as different federations, we do have a say. We can vote with our wallet, we can vote with our feet, and move to where we think is appropriate. We're just making sure that doing what we can to make sure that doesn't happen again in any other federations, because it showed a massive role. I think what happened was, and something I was saying, is that because there was no proper process for her to follow, such an abuse of power, powerlifting has grown so fast in the last 10 years. They're running it like they're still a very small, very niche sport, but it's grown so fast, it's kind of outgrown the means it has to control those situations and help those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it seems to me like like in the corporate world, for example, people are going to fall in love with each other, or people are going to have chemistry and want to have sex with each other, whatever, right? But I think when you're dealing with organizations and hierarchy, etc., declaring those relationships, and then if they end, managing that so that people get their own privacy and their own respect, that just seems like common sense to me. And I totally agree. It gets swept under the rug from the get-go. Like when the first things start happening, nobody knows. Often it's in secret, and then if it was managed more transparently, and like any other business, like a corporate relationship would be managed, and I think that would work a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, obviously you can't say never fall in love with a client, right? Because that's not realistic. For some people, sometimes you just find the right one. But in this instance, in this federation, you sign a waiver saying you won't, have sexual relationships with clients and stuff. And the big issue here is it's not only the coach, it's the higher up in said federation. So, and they're married. But the big thing was also the sexual assault allegation wasn't dealt with. It was brushed under the carpet, and she got handed a defamation lawsuit, which is not dealing with the situation. That's just trying to silence someone through litigation.
Totally unacceptable. Thank you, man. Thank you for being a stand for everybody in those communities, like all sporting communities and all federation-based communities, to actually feel safe and, just get on with their lives. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it is tough when, as a female in a probably a pretty male-dominated sport, it is tricky. And I know it's I didn't run this past you before we started, but I believe that there's also, Anthony, been some inappropriate cultural comments made about you in the past. Are you comfortable to talk about that and your kind of feelings about those?
Inappropriate cultural. Is this Theo giving you?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Is this about? I mean, there's been a lot of drama in power. Is this about the whole Indigenous thing?
Yeah.
So that one was an interesting one. Someone higher up in the Fed said something about the coon cheese. So I'm Aboriginal, and they made a post about people getting upset about the coon cheese, and saying how it's ridiculous. People want the name change and stuff. It is a weird take, right? It's like the name of a cheese, man. And if it's offensive, change it. It's not a big deal. Just change the name of the cheese. But they were upset that people were upset that they wanted the name change. Yeah. And I saw that post originally. I didn't really think twice about it until I read the comments. And the issue was that post. So as someone that runs any organization, you have, whether it be a gym, whether it be a federation, whether it be a business, anything like that, you have a obligation to make a safe platform and a safe environment for people. And as much as you can, right? As much as you can within being reasonable. But they gave a platform for people to come out that were racist and just have actual racial remarks against Indigenous people. They weren't filtering them. They weren't saying anything against them. So you go into the comments, and there was this dude making posts about, I've known so-and-so for years, and he's a top bloke, rah. And, it's ridiculous that people are upset about the coon name. And then you go into the dude's profile picture, and bang, slap right there, he's got a Nazi sticker on his arm, got a Nazi armband on, like a swastika on. So for me, it wasn't so much the original comment, it was the fact that someone so high up has given a platform to people like that, right? And then because, all right, you talk about coon cheese, but he's then made it okay to go deeper and to spread some pretty hateful remarks that was in that thread. So that was my big issue with it. Wasn't the substance itself, is what it created and what was allowed to transpire after the fact. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And I think, some people took it harder than I did, but that was my big gripe with it, was that you're giving a voice to people that really don't deserve a voice, to racists. It'd be the same as if you're giving a voice to people that are just misogynistic. You're not, your job is to not do that.
It's not
right? Not be like, hey,
anything great. That's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, it's okay to post up with your Nazi armband. You know what I mean? That was the big one. I just think you have your job being so high up, at my gym, my job is to make sure that the culture at my gym isn't racist, isn't sexist, isn't, doesn't discriminate.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how did you handle that situation? What did you do?
What did I do? I did a post about it, pretty much saying what I just said. I didn't leave the Fed. I competed a while later. I was very vocal about my opinion on allowing that kind of talk, though, which wasn't the purpose of the post originally. But for me, social media is a very powerful tool. Like, what can I do? Am I going to call the guy personally, or is he going to hear it more when you've got 500, 600, 800 likes on something and shares and stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people, a fair few people, other Indigenous athletes did leave. And yeah, so it was just I guess it was like, there was no real right way to do it. I completely support people that left. I support people that didn't. And I just think that it's important to say, I do not stand for this. It needs to be better. Now, with the other situation we were just talking about with the sexual assault allegations, and that was obviously something where people did leave, and I definitely support that. I think that was the right thing to do just because of how the whole federation handled it. But yeah, so that one was just about, again, being heard and having your say. But for me, it wasn't about leaving the Fed. It was just about going, hey, this isn't okay, don't do this. But I think it would have been very different, it would have been very different, say, if the person that posted it had have posted something racially aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. I do think it was very, I don't think it was the smartest post. I think it shows that they're a bit out of touch with what's going on in society nowadays, which is always disappointing. And I think I said that much in the thing, that it needs to be your job to stay up to date with current issues and stuff. I think it was a little bit, it was very out of touch. But that, for me, that was the extent of it. It wasn't a huge deal. It was enough to warrant talk about it. But I think that is a talk. It's just there needs to be a bit more education with people, and a bit smarter posting with people.
Education and love. That's always the answer, man. Pretty much.
Legitimately.
That solves almost everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have educated our audiences today and hopefully shown them some love. So like you said, Anthony, social media is a very good tool. And I mean, I don't know about your followers, if they would be interested in following a jiu-jitsu podcast, but when we post this up, if you could share it, we would love to have, maybe we could do like Theo, bring some of those powerlifters over to jiu-jitsu and
none of my athletes will hurt themselves.
have some more 100+ kilo guys on the mat. Jesus.
Yeah. Theo's looking lean though. He's trimmed down a lot.
Not to me. Oh, actually, lean maybe, but still huge.
Yeah, not lean in a bad way. I just mean he's looking jacked.
Yeah. Oh, he's much smaller than when I met him. Yeah, he could barely walk to the car though, Anthony, on our first date when we met. So
I remember he'd messaged about coming into Apex. I hadn't met him, and I remember him walking in the gym, and I was just like, oh, who's this dude? Like, look at it. I was like, look at the size of him. Like,
give him a beard and he's perfect.
Yeah. Like, I was like, there's not many people that I see that are much bigger than me, and he was huge. And then that session, I remember turning around and seeing him curl the 45-kilo dumbbells, and I was just like, who is this guy? Like,
yeah.
Look like he got made in a lab.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're lifting a little bit at home together, but not much, and hoping we could get back out there into jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. But he sends his regards. So thank you so much for giving up your time. Did you have anything more that you wanted to say, or any
no, this is really good. Like I'll post it up for sure. I don't like, it's not whether being a jiu-jitsu podcast is good. Like, people will follow that if the content's good, and you guys speak really well and everything. So like, I'll post something. People I listen to the most obscure random podcast just because I like the way that people speak and the guests they have on. And a lot of it, in the end of sport, a lot of it relates back to you, and your own individual sport, right? Like, because you're dealing with coaches, athletes, people like that. So as much as the sport might be different, there's still a lot of insight there in many ways, and very different, heaps of different topics. So, this is awesome. Thanks for having me on. It was awesome meeting you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just before you go, are you at Gaffney Street, Coburg? Is that where your gym is?
Yes. Yeah, 52 Gaffney Street.
Okay, got it. So if any of our people want to get down there and and get
come down.
Unlock.
We give everyone a week for free. So when we're open, you can come down and try it out, meet us, see what powerlifting's about. And if you just want to do some strength conditioning for jiu-jitsu, we cater to that as well. It's not like we started out as a powerlifting gym, but we've branched out a lot since then.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's an awesome setup, but you know what? No mirrors. So any of you bodybuilding guys
we've
out
got
there.
some now.
Oh, you've got some now. Oh man.
Is that because you don't like to look at yourself? I heard you say that earlier in the podcast. Did you say you don't like to look at yourself?
No, so I don't like because I just look at my flaws.
So you're human. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. But no, now we've got, and when Theo was there, we had nothing. Now we've got like leg extensions, hamstring curls, plate loaded squats and stuff. So it's growing a lot.
Wow. Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks again for joining us. This is our first, I guess, foray into, I guess, more health and fitness rather than just jiu-jitsu. And like you said, even though we are a jiu-jitsu podcast, we don't really get that technical like some of the other podcasts do. We really want to get to know the person behind that we're talking to. So thank you so much for sharing some of your insights and your story. And we'll probably have this out. Today is Theo's birthday, so we'll have it out.
Happy birthday, Theo.
Yeah, thank you. In about a week and a half. So
Theo edits all of these podcasts, by the way.
Oh, really?
He's a machine.
He may cut some of this stuff out. We'll see. No, he won't. He never would. We've made him sound great. So no, he's definitely keeping his stuff in.
The weight room, and he's a machine on the computer. So he's awesome.
Yes, he is. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll hopefully have this out ASAP.
Yeah. Sweet as. Thanks, and when just tag me in it, I'll post it up or send it to me.
We'll do. Okay.
See ya.
Thanks, Anthony. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.